Right, for more on this, I'm joined now by Transport Department Spokesperson Ayanda-Allie Paine. Ayanda, good evening and thank you for your time. From what I'm hearing, there are three areas of disagreement here. The NTA especially are talking about a 40% tariff increase, 100% capacity is one of the issues. And of course, they're completely unhappy about the relief fund and the quantum particularly that has been allocated for that. This has, of course, caused the association to walk out of your meeting and your agreement, and they're saying they're shutting operations tomorrow. Now, you're saying you've noted with concern the announcement by Santaco of the shutdown. I always wonder, what does noted with concern mean?
It means that we are mindful, and before I continue, thank you very much for having us. Good evening to you, Thabo. Good evening to your viewers. I think what's important for us to put on the table is that we're on the same side here. The Ministry of Transport is not fighting against the taxi associations. It's not fighting against the industry in any way, shape or form. We are noting with concern because we're mindful of the situation on the ground. We know that the industry is in dire straits. We know that it is difficult times for the sector and for the world at large. And for that reason, we sympathize and indeed we empathize with the industry, which is why Minister Mbalula went out of his way to not only seek within the coffers of the Transport Department what he could find for the taxi industry, but also ask his counterparts in National Treasury, also speak to his peers in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, also go out of his way to speak to the Department of Small Business to say, what can we put together to assist the taxi industry? And that is why we emphasize the word relief, we emphasize the word assistance as opposed to compensation, Thabo, because we're noting the fact that while it is compensation that the taxi industry is seeking for, they would like a rand for rand exchange of what they have lost. We as a government simply cannot afford that. And so that is the reason why we're saying we note these concerns, and it is rather concerning to us as well that this is the route that some associations are choosing to take at a time when we should be coming together to find, as the Minister said, creative solutions on how to make this money stretch.
It seems what got them quite upset, Ayanda, is the fact that the Minister also went ahead and made the announcement before having had the conversation with them, or at least while the conversation was still going on. He then went ahead and made the announcement.
I think what's important to note is that Minister Mbalula has a very healthy relationship with the taxi industry. In fact, it was one of the first sectors that he addressed when he came into this office about a year ago, give or take a few months. And he continues to enjoy that amicable conversation from time to time with the taxi industry. I think if the operators or the mother bodies were to also be direct, they would tell you that at every single step during these lockdown regulations and directions, Minister Mbalula has called them to the table and briefed them or deliberated on some of the issues that they may agree with or perhaps disagree with. So there's always been that cordial relationship. However, it should never be mistaken for permission. And I think perhaps that's where the dispute came in, that Minister then needs to ask for permission before he speaks to the country about some of the developments. This was a status update for South Africans. It was not to say that the conversations were defeated, that we were not going to continue. This was to bring the country into confidence and say, here's what we've achieved so far, and the journey continues. And I think that's important because many South Africans were beginning to wonder, what is the situation on the ground and what's happening? So perhaps I understand that Santaco may have sought some sort of indication that Minister was going to address the public, but permission is something that the Minister does not, unfortunately, need from anybody in order to address South Africans about taxpayers' money.
So the objecting to the amount, were there any other amounts that were proposed?
So there is the 20,000 per taxi per month for 3 months that was put on the table. And it is something that Minister Mbalula said, as much as we would love to assist the taxi industry, is simply unaffordable. That was the amount that was put together. But it's interesting to note that he had moved so much, even as government. I mean, at first, what we were able to put together was the sum of about 800 million. which already was generous if we think of the need that's in the country and the fact that hawkers have not been making money, that people in the tourism sector have not been making money, people in the arts industry were not making money. But we're not going to compare struggles here. We needed to focus on the taxi industry, and that 800 million, they said, will not cover your queue marshals, it would not cover the association employees and the like. And when we went back and said, is there anything that we could possibly do? The amount was revised into that 1.135 billion. And that has absolutely exhausted what is humanly possible and what the fiscus can allow. So
bringing the nation into confidence, Ayanda, if the 20,000 per taxi was to be indeed the proposal on the table, how much would that actually cost the country?
It would be in the region of about 10 billion. And of course, remember, that would just be for your minibus taxis. We haven't begun to have that conversation about your e-hailing, your Ubers, your Bolts, Taxify. We haven't had the conversation about metered taxis and whether or not they would also be able to share in that amount of money. And I think it's also very important. I need to bring this again and again to say that would not be able to be feasible for us, because it would not serve as relief. That would then be rand for rand compensation, and we simply cannot afford that.
Is the minister willing to back down on the proposed mechanism for distribution? Because apparently that is seemingly another bone of contention, the suggestion that this be distributed via SARS and the likes.
Yes, indeed. So Minister Mbalula has opted for the SARS way. That is not just his personal decision, might I add. This is something that Treasury also needs in terms of the checks and balances. I always say this and will repeat it again. The last thing that we want is a COVID gate, where we look back and say monies were dispersed, monies that are from hardworking South Africans who contribute to the fiscus were given out in a manner that cannot be accounted for. And so SARS, in terms of its capacity, it's able to have people's information. You're able to walk in. You're also able to utilize their services online. It has customer care lines that you can also use if you prefer the telephonic means. It has a database of all the taxpayers. And the taxi industry also waxed lyrical about the fact that they are indeed taxpayers, contrary to popular belief. So it should not be a problem then if they say they're as compliant as they say they are, then using SARS as a matter or a means to distribute or disperse funds should not be as problematic as it is. It's an easy route for all of us. They have the capacity, they have the wherewithal to distribute the funds.
So then are you saying that is also not an option, or are you saying you're still open to engage on that?
At the moment, as things stand, it is not an option, unfortunately, because, Thabo, it's very important to remember that we're dealing with taxpayers' money here that must be accounted for. If we're going to give funds to a particular sector, we need to make sure that those funds are going to a reputable bank account, that they're going to a reputable permit holder who is legally licensed to be on the road, and not just Ayanda, who was sitting at home and maybe has a broken down taxi that she's been saving there for the past 6 years, and then wakes up in the morning and decides, you know what, I'm going to cash in on this government relief fund. So it's important that you make sure that if Ayanda is saying she is a taxi operator and she has been significantly impacted by COVID-19, that she has the documents to prove it, that she is indeed who she says she is. And this is why we cannot negotiate when it comes to those T's and C's.
Any plans for stranded commuters tomorrow? Because judging by the tweet from Santaco a couple of hours ago, maybe two, that strike is going ahead, or the shutdown at least.
Indeed, and it's unfortunate that we have to pick up via the media as well that indeed the shutdown seems to be going ahead. We are appealing for calm. We are appealing for cool and level head. Of course, we cannot prohibit anybody from exercising their democratic right to protest if they so wish, but we're also asking that we don't then transgress and impede on the rights of others to commute to and from work. And those who can use buses may do so via and other means of transportation do so. But we are appealing that we do not see scenes where people are being hampered if they are trying to make their way to work. We're asking that we remember that we're on the same side here. We're all dealing with this COVID-19 outbreak. It is not anybody's fault that we find ourselves where we are right now. If anything, now is not the time for war, as Minister Mbalula has said. It's the time where we need to be working together.